All right, so here's the importance. Personality is roughly 50% heritable. All right, so nature versus nurture, it's 50-50, right? And 50-50 is being pretty generous, right? And the reason for that is because there's a lot of evidence to suggest that over time, so by the time people have less environmental influences on them, their personality is about 80% heritable. 80% means that you have almost no difference at all. And so by the time that somebody's like a senior, they have nobody constraining them in almost any capacity. Their personality is just entirely what they're born with, essentially. Essentially, right? Not entirely, but essentially. And look, a lot of these things are going to be embedded in us from the environment, but 80% is that just tells you, like, look, if somebody's born an extrovert, they're going to be an extrovert. If somebody's born an introvert, they're going to be an introvert. If somebody's just very disagreeable, they're going to be disagreeable. If somebody's very open and creative, look, they're going to be creative. You can't beat it out of somebody, right? It's just that's their nature, right? They're just going to stay like that. And so personality is roughly 50% heritable, though. For students, 50-50. Now, personality is concerned with the student's innate proclivity to engage in certain behaviors, right? So proclivities, they're inclined to engage in certain behaviors. And your goal is to stray them as far away from antisocial behavior as possible via collaboration with others. And so any one person does not make the difference. It takes a village to raise a child. And there's like 40 million exclamation points right there for good reasons. It takes a village to raise a child. And so what is the math on this? Where am I getting this from? Because I'm making some big claims here, and I want to make sure that people really recognize what the true difference and impact can be as an individual teacher on a person's personality. And so all you got to do is break it down by the amount of time that you're with somebody, the control that you have over the environment, as well as the amount of, well, that's really it. And so, and you got to factor in their age as well. So anyways, let's start off here. I did the math, and the difference that you can make as one individual teacher teaching 1 hour a day for 1 year, 1 school year, is about 0.041%. Now, there's some assumptions that have to be made when we're making this, when we're getting this number here, but we're going to go through it here. So, how do you come up with that little bit of an impact towards a person's personality, right? And so that's assuming 50% heritability, right? So you start off, you say, okay, what is the heritability of a person's personality, a student's personality? Let's just say that they're 15 years old, right? So we're just assuming that the student is 15 years old. That's what we're assuming. That's an assumption. Now, you could say, well, they're 12 years old, or you could say, well, they're 10 years old. And like, fair enough, like, right? But you have to state that, right? So it's not just, you can pick whatever you want. And so you start off, you say 50% heritable. So you do 0.5, right? You make a decimal point, right? And then you got to times that by the number of days you're with the student in the amount of time that the student was alive, right? And so if the student is 15 years old, you take 15 times 365. That's going to be the number of days that they've been alive, right? So you put that into parentheses. Then you take 180 days, which is how many school days there are in a year. So 180 days divided by 365 times 15, right? And so that's going to be the number of days that you're with them for the amount of time that they've been alive. Then you times that by the amount of control that you have over your environment, right? Because think about it, right? I'm not like a wizard. I don't have telekinesis. I can't perfectly control my environment, right? Like I can't just sit there and be like telekinesis and just start moving tables up, right? Up around the classroom with my mind, right? I'm moving them around with my mind, right? Moving things up and down. If I have students talking, I can't just be like, snap my fingers, they never talk ever again, right? Or I can't just like snap my fingers and everybody just moves straight towards me like this, like they'll just be sitting in a desk, right? I can't just snap my fingers and they just go like this. And they're just ready to learn, totally engaged, right? Every ounce of focus is on the board, and they're ready to learn, and they're ready to get those good grades. I can't do that because I don't have complete control over the environment, right? And so, like, you have to recognize that as a teacher. So this is another variable, right? Now, this is arbitrary. You could say, well, they have 80% control over the environment, or they only have 40% control over the environment, right? But we're just making an assumption. We're assuming that a teacher has 60% control over an environment. So we're saying 0.6 will be our next factor there. So again, we got heritability times the amount of days that you've been with them divided by the amount of time that they've been alive times 0.6, the amount of control you have over the environment. And then this is the amount of hours that you're going to be with them per day, right? Because, yes, you're with them 180 days, but you're not with them 24 hours a day for those 180 days. You're with them only 1 hour a day for those 180 days, right? So, because you're only with them for one period a day, right? And so 1 divided by 24, right? So you put that all in parentheses and you're going to get a number. It's going to spit out some number. right? And then you times that by 100, right? Because that's just the decimal, so you got to times it by 100 in order to get the percentage, and you get 0.041%. And that's the impact that you can make to a person's personality, right? Because that's the impact because that's the amount of personality because there's only so much personality in that 50% that you can alter, right? That comes from the environment. And so a very small difference. And you think to yourself, well, how on earth am I going to be able to alter how on earth can I possibly alter their environment that much and make a difference? It's like, well, you simply can't make a difference by yourself. I mean, you just can't. Now, what we're going to look at next would be, can you make a difference if you engage everybody? So that's the real question, right? So alone, you don't make a difference. But if you engage the village, it takes a village to raise a child. Now we can start talking some real numbers here. So we're still going to assume 50% heritability. So 0.5 times, again, they're 15 years old. So 365 times 15, right? And we're going to divide that by 365 times 15, right? So we're engaging them positively with all stakeholders every single day from the first day they were born, right? So 365 times 15 divided by 365 times 15, right? So it's really just, times 1, right? And so, anyways, times 0.6, right? Again, the amount of control that you have over the environment, that's going to stay constant, right? You can't change that, right? Again, it's an arbitrary number, right? But you can't change that. And so the numbers that are going to be the end here could go up or down depending on this factor pretty easily. And same for the heritability of personality. You could go up or down. It could change drastically. But then how many hours a day? We're going to do 16 divided by 24, right? Because it's assuming that they're left to their own accord when they're going to sleep for 8 hours. Now, they could stay awake and do whatever they want, but we're just assuming 16 divided by 24 because you can't really influence them when they're just in their bedroom and they're supposed to be sleeping. And so 16 divided by 24 times 100, right? So you take all of that, you put that in parentheses, you get some number, then you times that by 100 because, again, we had a decimal. We need to make it a percentage. That's 100. Now it's a 20% difference. And that 20% difference could be the difference between pro-social behavior and anti-social behavior. So you have to understand the math behind these things, right? They're extremely complex, but heritability of personality is going to be very indicative of the proclivities that they're expressing within their environment. So you have to understand this, right? You don't make a difference alone, right? But if you can engage everybody, which is where this 16 out of 24 hours a day would be, and this 365 divided by 15 times 15 would be, right? You're engaging all these other stakeholders into the fold. Now you can make a big difference. But that difference, look, you're talking a lot of time, right? This doesn't happen overnight, right? It doesn't happen overnight. This is a very long period of time. And you could say, well, the vast majority of the aspect of personality that's not heritable, it comes from the early childhood education. Now, you could say, okay, so then therefore 20% would be even less. And so we're just going to assume that, right? So 20% is like the most optimistic thing imaginable, right? So ideally, the people who have the most impact are the people who are influencing the kids at the earliest, youngest age possible. And so 20% is very optimistic, but hey, look, maybe that difference is possible under the most bestest circumstances imaginable, right? But we're just assume that it's going to be even lower than that. And if you assume that it's lower than that, then you recognize the importance for early childhood education and engaging stakeholders properly in a productive, positive manner.